Today is April 29, 2016. The time is now 8:51 p.m. Ann Pink is here reporting for all of you. And up next, from Dave Hodges of the Common Sense Show, we're going to be talking about Goldman Sachs and bail-ins and bailouts. And also, we're going to be talking about your bank account. It bears repeating, how many times have we been warning during the course of several years about your bank account not being safe for your money? Well, let's delve a little bit deeper into this topic, okay? I read for the visually impaired and for small device users. Please use the link if anyone wishes to. Thank you. Let's begin. Goldman Sachs bail-in plot designed to steal your bank account. Bailouts, bail-ins. The average consumer has trouble keeping these terms and their meaning straight. Both terms are relatively new on the American economic scene. Here is what these terms mean. A bailout is when outside investors rescue a borrower by injecting money to help service a debt. Bailouts of failing banks in Greece, Portugal, and Iceland were primarily financed by taxpayers. A bail-in occurs when the borrower's creditors are forced to bear some of the burden by having a portion of their debt written off. For example, bondholders in Cyprus banks and depositors with more than 100,000 euros in their accounts were forced to write off a portion of their holdings. This approach eliminates some of the risk for taxpayers by forcing other creditors to share in the pain and suffering. As an American investor, if given no choice, I would prefer a bailout over a bail-in. In the case of a bail-in, it is my money that is being stolen from me by the bankers so that they can keep their institution afloat, as opposed to the bail-in, where it is my money that is directly taken from me in order to satisfy bankers' debts. Goldman Sachs is covertly ushering in bail-ins beneath the radar. Goldman Sachs has a new online bank that it acquired from General Electric Company. The evidence is quite clear that Goldman Sachs has taken the lead in what will become the great American ripoff. Ew. Which will lead to massive bail-ins around the country. Before we go further in this developing story in which bail-ins are already happening in America, let's take a look at the character of Goldman Sachs in order to gain some much-needed perspective on who will be setting the trend in this newest waves of the bankers hijacking the country. Goldman Sachs and integrity are mutually exclusive terms. If one wants to predict the next false flag attack, one merely has to watch the actions and the money movements of Goldman Sachs. In the days leading up to the attacks on 9/11, Goldman Sachs shorted the sale of airline stocks, which plummeted in the aftermath of the attacks. Just a coincidence, you say? Well, in the days leading up to the housing bubble, Goldman Sachs shorted housing stocks, which ignited the bubble. The federal government fined Goldman Sachs, but in typical fashion, nobody went to jail. Just another coincidence, you say? As I documented in my 7-part series, The Great Gulf Coast Holocaust, Goldman Sachs executed a put option for preferred insiders invested in Transocean stock, thus protecting the profits of these preferred insiders on the morning of the explosion. Transocean was the owner of the ill-fated oil rig. Goldman Sachs also sold the lion's share of its BP stock less than 2 weeks before that fateful day on April 20, 2010. Nowco was a subsidiary of Goldman Sachs and BP at the time of the explosion. Who's Nowco? Well, Nowco was the exclusive manufacturer of the deadly oil dispersant Corexit. Corexit has done more to wreck the ecology of the Gulf as well as the health of the Gulf Coast residents than the oil spill itself. Again, this is all documented in my 7-part series, and by the way, I count another 3 coincidences in this paragraph alone. And if you're keeping score, we are looking at a total of 5 amazing coincidences. But wait, there's more. Uh-huh. The moral of this story is clear. If there is to be a significant false flag event, the financial actions of Goldman Sachs will prove to be the key. And Goldman Sachs' actions have signaled yet another oncoming false flag. As I reported on in April of 2013, Goldman Sachs instructed its brokers to sell short on gold stocks. And then, after the bulk of the gold market panicked and the price of gold plummeted in a massive sell-off, the Goldman Sachs boys did it again. The Goldman Sachs brokers began to purchase gold in massive amounts for its elite clients at a greatly depressed price. Oh, and by the way, Goldman Sachs employed the exact same strategy with regard to the Gulf oil tragedy. When Goldman Sachs sold off BP stock in the days before the explosion, they purchased massive amounts of BP stock at a greatly reduced price, oh boy, in June of 2010. In short, and no pun intended, Goldman Sachs is clearly a criminal enterprise organization. Yep. Any financial endeavor that Goldman Sachs is involved in should be looked at with a wary eye. Goldman Sachs will lead the way in the covert theft of your money. So beware of that, folks. Okay? All right? In a major transaction that went virtually unnoticed, Goldman Sachs just took over $16 billion of deposits from the online business it bought from GE Capital. Goldman Sachs immediately merged this platform with its GS Bank USA and created a hybrid banking model. Goldman Sachs is offering 1.05% interest on savings accounts that are opened online. The bank has added to its deposit base by 700%. Here is where the Goldman Sachs actions get very interesting and very serious. On this past Tuesday, 2 U.S. agencies have announced their special version of a long-term liquidity rule outlined by global regulators in 2014. When we start reading professional-sounding catchphrases, it is time to clutch our collective wallets, as Goldman announces that it is embracing the funding ratio policy that requires banks to hold enough easy-to-sell assets to meet any liabilities coming due in the next 12 months. The easy-to-sell assets are, all together now, your bank account. New rules also. Hoping you will get lost in the words, Goldman is planning to rob you blind. And under these new policies, deposits are viewed as a more stable form of financing than market-based sources such as repossessions. Goldman Sachs said in its latest annual report that it's already in full compliance with the pending short-term rule called the liquidity coverage ratio. The term the liquidity coverage ratio means that your deposits are the source of backing for the banks instead of the U.S. taxpayer. However, the only way that could be achieved is if the FDIC is not involved. And as for the FDIC to be not involved, your bank assets could not be counted as money. I wrote an article in November of 2014 in which I stated that your money had been stolen. Remember that article, folks? Why would I make such an outrageous claim? Because At the G20 conference held at that time in Brisbane, Australia, it was decided that a depositor's assets would no longer be called money when it went into the bank. This became the impetus for shifting the backing of banks away from bailouts to bail-ins, where your deposit can be confiscated by the bank at any time in any amount. Uh-oh, any amount. I guess that's $1 to $1,000,000 or more. Yipes. Well, the conclusion is, who else but Goldman Sachs would be the one to usher in a brand new way to steal American citizens' money? Ooh, crooks. I am not Nostradamus, but I do have the globalist playbook, and I know that they are going for broke, and soon the game will soon be over if we are not willing to make a stand. Convert your banking assets and retirement accounts to more permanent and sound investments. In other words, gold. Stop shopping in their Walmarts, Kmarts, and other slave marts. Get out of the exploitive globalist system. Shop locally. Eat out in the small family-owned restaurants. And most of all, get out of the dollar while you still can. Plan for what's coming. Plan to survive and to thrive after the event. Well, the key point here, folks, is he's saying that Goldman Sachs is going to steal your bank account. Yeah, and they have so many coincidences. We counted 5 of them in that paragraph. And those are not coincidences, folks. That's clear theft. That's clear manipulation of the stock market. Look at this, okay? They purchased Transocean stocks, right? And they probably knew what was going to happen, or BP stock rather, and thereby there's this connection to Corexit. Oh boy, this is clearly a corporation, a banking entity that is taking full advantage of the taxpayer in more ways than one. And remember, they now have in place a way to steal the people's money out of their bank accounts in any denomination. That is very troubling, folks. They can do it in any amount, and they can say, well, your money is now our money. Go figure. That is a problem, to be sure. Thanks for watching, and please stay safe. Pink out.